The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our new live webcast, Real Licenses in Virtual Environments. Join us each month for new powerful messages, technical tips, and success stories that will leave you inspired and ready to get your protection, licensing, and security techniques another step closer to perfection. At WIBU-SYSTEMS, we empower software publishers and intelligent device manufacturers with cutting-edge technologies, new business models, and tailor-made consulting training. Let us help you upgrade, optimize, and automate your entire license lifecycle management so you can focus on monetizing your business at a higher level. My name is Daniela Previtali, Global Marketing Director of WIBU-SYSTEMS, and I'm delighted to have you here with us today. We are joined by Stefan Bamberg, Senior Key Account and Partner Manager, and Wolfgang Völker, Director of Product Management and Support, both from the headquarters of WIBU-SYSTEMS. Virtual environments are becoming increasingly popular. Virtualization is cost-efficient and extremely flexible, and it is easy to use with major providers such as Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure. However, virtualization exposes ISVs to additional software protection and licensing threats. With CodeMeter, you have the tools and methods you need to safeguard your IP, no matter which virtual environment configuration you and your customers prefer. Some housekeeping we need to take care of before we start. For everyone who's joining us today, I want to remind you that we will be reserving some time at the end of the session for Q&A. And I'd like to invite you to submit any question you have in the live chat box. This session is being recorded, and a link to the replay will be posted directly to you in the next couple of days. And don't forget, stay with us throughout the live session for your chance to win 3 hours of free CodeMeter consultation from the most brilliant minds at our company. At the end of the webinar, a new tab in your browser with 3 simple quiz questions will show up. You can submit one choice for each multiple answer question. We will draw the winner from among those who reply correctly and notify them at the time of the replay announcement. Without further ado, I'll pass things over to Stefan. The floor is yours.
Yeah, welcome to our last webinar this year. It's called Real Licenses in Virtual Environments. My name is Stefan Bamberg, and together with my colleague Wolfgang Völker, we want to introduce you the behavior of licenses in virtual machines, which can be a secret, but we want to show that it's not really a secret. So first of all, we have a closer look to the different types of virtual machines. What virtual machines are available? Why do you use virtual machines? So virtual machines on a local PC is mainly used for test purposes, quality assurance. So you have your well-defined environment with the operating system, with all parameters set. And that's the same story for software evaluation that you have on your own PC. You know what you have certain versions of an operating system available. Maybe you have different operating systems available. So that's a very good thing to use. Of course, virtual machines are very popular on servers because to ensure a high availability, it is very easy to move an environment, a complete environment from one system to another system. For example, to make sure that a system is available all the time. And of course, you have the hardware layer independence, so there is no need to know about the underlying hardware, the bare metal. You can use it with every operating system and do not really care about the hardware, underlying hardware. And a wonderful thing is, of course, the virtual machines in the cloud. For example, Microsoft Azure, you have Amazon AWS. So it is a very cost-effective operation possible of the virtual machines. You only pay what you need. It is very easy to scale the performance and to scale the amount of machines that you want. It's just on a fingertip. It's very easy to use and it's very cost-effective. But we have, of course, also different ways of virtual environments. And Wolfgang, that is the slide that you jump in.
Yes, hello also from my side. We have virtual containers as another kind of option of virtualization, which has become very famous in the last 2 years. containers in general, virtual containers like Docker, are available also from before, but this becomes now very famous with Docker. It is a light version of a virtual machine, so you don't have to store a lot of data. This is working on a different layer of virtualization, and it makes life very easy for some purposes. For example, if you have complex software with different services, different applications on this, then you can make a very easy delivery because you don't have to take care about what to install on the system, this and that. You can put this into a Docker container and then it will work out of the box. You bring everything that you need, but the operating system itself is there and you don't need to ship this one. You are always running in this defined system environment, and so this makes it really easy. And to make it more easy, you ship your Docker containers also in a virtual machine itself, and this makes you makes it very easy to ship everything, and you get some file with one operating system, and then everything else in there is in Docker containers, and you can also work easily with this on testing software, on delivering your stuff, and so on. Well, that was a short introduction about the different versions of virtualization. Let's now have a look about the threat scenarios and the risks. There are general threats and risks. For example, the duplicating of a license. So you might want, or one of the bad guys might want to copy a dongle, to copy a license file, to bring an old version of a license file, and then you can just duplicate the license and can work with it on a second computer, something like this. If you have some timing restriction on a license, then you might want to set the local time on your machine back to the old value, and hopefully you can reuse the software. The same is for pay-per-use units. You want to set it back to the old state where you have the 5 units again that you have had before, but in the meantime you have used them. So try to get the file again to, well, somehow refresh the dongle to get the pay-per-use units again. And another idea is if you have the next student in your company and you need another license from a piece of software, you might not want to pay another time for this expensive software. And so you want to try to overuse some network licenses. So you have bought 3 licenses and now you have a student and you need a 4th one. And then you just try, oh, how can I work around this, and work simultaneously with more licenses than you have purchased. Well, these are some of the standard threats and risks.
Yes, but there are additionally another general threats and risk, because we do not take care only about the licenses. You have to take care about the calls in your applications as well. So there are API calls to check if a license is available, if it is really valid. And you have to take care that these API calls are not tampered, are not hacked by a hacker. So removing the shell or the API calls is a threat that you face. And additionally, you have to take care about the API calls itself in your application. Sometimes it's very easy, if we talk about .NET applications, Java applications, that you can decompile the application and you see the API calls, and the hacker will check that API calls so that he is able to use functionalities that he has not bought or he is not allowed to use. Of course, your intellectual property is very important. Maybe you spend a lot of money to get algorithms to create algorithms in your applications, and you want to make sure that nobody is able to decompile that and find out how your algorithm is working. So it is also important to take care about your own executable code or dynamic link library code to protect that against reverse engineering. And last but not least, we have use of the licenses on the user side. That two different scenarios. You have software container licenses that are bound to a hardware, and someone is changing that hardware, and that leads to a break of the licenses. And of course, your customers can lose the dongle, and then the licenses are also gone.
So now let's have a look on the additional threats and risks of virtualization. So the first one is that in your virtualization, all the bindings of the system, the properties of the system are simulated. And therefore, it is very difficult to find values where we can bind on with some licenses, and therefore it might be easier to get another instance of this virtual machine get up and running and still having the license available. Another famous option of virtualization is to use snapshots. Then you can reset the virtual machine to any old state that you have saved before, and think again of my example with the 5 pay-per-use units. Then you have used them, and then you just switch back the system to the old snapshot, and whoo, the 5 units are there again. That's what you do with some snapshot. There are maybe also some risks if you have virtualization in high availability environments. The virtual machines are moving around, and you might have the risk that some of the properties change during flying the virtual machines around, and then a license might break, which is not expected and should not be the case, of course. So this was a special view on the risks and the additional threats of virtualization. But now we at first want to have a short overview about the code meter technology part.
Yes, because it's the base of all the licenses, and that's the way how we can meet that challenges with our code meter technology. And first of all, let's have a look into our different containers. So first of all, and we are well known for that since about 30 years, is the so-called CM dongle. This is a USB or CF card or SD card device that has smart card chip on board where all the licenses and the security keys are stored. We have the CMAC licenses, which represents software implementation of such a dongle, but no hardware is needed. We have the cloud container, one of our latest products, where the containers are stored in the cloud, in a database. And we have on top of that a so-called license server that makes licenses available in the local area network using the different container types that we have shown here on our slides: dongles, CMAC licenses, and cloud containers. So as I mentioned before, the dongles has a smart card chip, Infineon chip SLE97, that stores very secure the keys, the cryptographic keys that are needed for encryption, for decryption, and to ensure the security of our licenses. And the CM Cloud container is, of course, operated in a secure environment of our WIBU operating services team in a data center in Frankfurt. And the complete license informations and the keys are stored in the cloud. And the network license server that I mentioned before, that makes licenses available in a local area network of your customers just by clicking the option license quantity and available in the network. And as shown before, you can use a CM dongle, the CMAC license, or a cloud container as a base for offering the licenses in a local network. But let's have a closer look to our CM Act licenses now.
The CM Act license is in general stored in an encrypted license file and is bound to the hardware properties of the system where it's running on. So it's almost individual and bound and encrypted to run only on this computer. All the information, the license information, is saved in this encrypted license file. But of course, there are some additional paths that are encrypted with different keys and stored dynamically on the system. For example, the timestamps or the pay-per-use units and something like this. To protect us against modification of the encrypted license file, just playing it back to the old state, we are using a generation counter, which ensures that it is not able to use an old one. So this is just a bright overview. Let's have a look now about the binding technology itself, which is called Smartbind, which is a standard binding for an individual system.
Yes, the question here is, who cares about all that characteristics and the details that Wolfgang mentioned before? So it's the CodeMeter runtime, the CodeMeter license server. It runs as a local service, so in case of Windows, it is a service in the background. In case of Linux, it is a daemon, and this service and daemon, they care about all the things. So they hide the generation counter and dynamic data of the license files. They detect the hardware properties and the configuration data of the system, and we will see later on how that works in detail. It detects virtual environment, which is very important for us in this context. It detects cloud environments, Microsoft Azure, Amazon AWS, and that's what Wolfgang told you before, it detects Docker environments so that we are able to react in the right way when we know, when the CodeMeter runtime service know in which environment it's running. So these are the important things for that. And now let's see how that binding works of a CM Act license. So it is necessary to bind such a CM Act license to the hardware of a computer to avoid that it can be copied easily from one system to another system. And therefore we have a large property catalog that contains all hardware characteristics of a system which are available in the market. So a hard drive ID, a MAC address, a CPU ID, and a BIOS serial number, a TPM chip, for example. And in the moment when we activate such a license on the system, we check on the system what characteristics are really available on that system. And these are named available properties. And you see the customer has 2 hard drives, has a network adapter, CPU ID, CPU type, the BIOS, and some other information of that system. And we take as much information as possible, and we create a so-called property vector that represents the system. It's a fingerprint of the system, an individual fingerprint of the system, because each PC will have other information available for this property vector, and that is the differentiation between 2 systems. So we have the fingerprint, we have an inventory so that we know which hardware characteristics are used for that fingerprint, and we have so-called redundancy bits to make sure that even if a customer changes some of this hardware characteristics, we are able to fill that gaps, and that's what is shown in the next slide, where we use that license. Now, license is already activated, and now the customer uses that license. Your application is assessing the license, and you see there are some changes made in the meantime. So the hard drive 1 is no longer available. there is a change in the network adapter, there's another MAC address. So these two values are missing in that inventory. And here is where the redundancy bit comes onto the stage. So we fill that gaps with the redundancy bits, and that leads to the fact that the fingerprint stays the same, and that means that the CMF license is available and is okay. Now let's have a look on the case when more hardware characteristics are changed on that system. So in this case, there is also the CPU ID changed, and you see we do not have enough redundancy bits to fill that gap. So in principle, we assume that this is now another computer, and that leads to the fact that the fingerprint cannot be calculated in a way that it is okay, and then the license breaks, and the user cannot longer use this license because too many things have changed on that system. That's the way how we use that Smartbind, which has a patent for that, to make sure that it is best created, a best created fingerprint on the system, and that you have the advantage, the upside that the customer can change hardware characteristic without a break of the license itself. But there are, of course, new challenges for different systems and for the public cloud.
Yeah, we have, of course, different inventory collections for different systems. So we are running on Windows, Linux, macOS, Linux ARM, also now starting with the next version coming in a few weeks before Christmas on the macOS based on ARM. And of course, on all these systems, the properties you need from the hardware are derived in a different way. And on some systems you get this, on some other systems you get that. And so we have different catalogs for this. And of course, on virtual machines and also in the virtual environments like Azure or Amazon, we have a different collection because we know what kind of values will change from one instance to another and what will stay the same. And of course, the ones that stay the same, we are not interested in. The weighting is based on many years of WIBU-SYSTEMS experience in the field, so we always enhance also the mixture of the properties, which is then changed over time because, for example, on changes of hardware. So there are some new adapters in the hardware that not have been seen before. Well, something like a Bluetooth is introduced or something else, and then we might get new serial numbers, new properties on a system. And so we increase the number of properties, and sometimes we also scratch out some of the old ones because no one anymore has a SCSI adapter in his system, for example. To give you the option to set the level of the tolerance by yourself, we have three different tolerance levels. This is tight, medium, and loose. And the standard binding should always be medium. And then we find a solution that some changes on the system are accepted and it still works. But if you change too much, it will no longer work. If you deliver your systems by yourself and you say, okay, this will not be changed, then you also can, for example, choose tight. If you focus on the availability of the system and you say, I don't care if it is at some time it's changing a lot of things, then you can switch to loose. For The virtual machines, we have a special writing, which includes also the generation ID, a feature that has been introduced especially for virtual machines, originally invented by Microsoft and then used by all the famous providers of virtualization. For Microsoft Azure, since more than a year, we support special Azure ID. So if we detect automatically that we are running inside an Azure environment, and then we don't care of all the other details, we just bind to the Azure ID, which is then a really reliable property of the system. And we will see in detail later what this means when it breaks and when it not will break. The same is now coming for Amazon, for the AWS. There we have the instance ID, and we detect also this Amazon system, and then we do the same. So this looks in the graphic a little bit,
Yeah, in comparison to that, what I have shown before, it's a very easy structure that we have. So the property catalog for Azure or for AWS is just, we have the corresponding IDs and the property vector are the IDs, and so the fingerprint is inherited from that ID. So it's a very simple thing, but it's very powerful at the end. So just to complete the set of CMX licenses that we are offering with CodeMeter, we have also the so-called Nobind licenses. That means this is not a license that is bind to a system, to the hardware characteristics. It's just for storing keys in a very secure way. So it's just for encrypting applications, for example, so that the key is stored in that non-bind license. It's not bind to the hardware, as I mentioned before, and there are two flavors of that. There's option one, it's just a so-called protection-only license, or how we have it as a new product now, the IP protection. So you just protect your application, you encrypt your application, and the key is stored in a license file, but it is not bound because it's the same one for all your customers. And the second option is that this is in combination with a trial in expiration date, and we have then the so-called trial licenses. You can choose a period up to 90 days, and we make sure that this trial license is only activated once, registered once on a system, but it's the same license for all of your customers. Maybe if you have a trade show and you want to distribute thousands of DVDs with a trial version, that is the solution that helps you to make that happen. After checking the CMX licenses very deep, let's now have a closer look to our network license server. What is the miracle behind that?
Well, this is not a miracle, but it's a powerful option, and it will come into the play, especially in the Docker environments and also for standard virtual environments. Therefore, let's have a look on this. So we run a network license server somewhere on a system on your side, on customer side. This can be either a CM dongle, CMX license, or cloud container in there. And on the other side, we have a client that wants to access these licenses. And on the network license server, we run our CodeMeter license server. And on the client side, we run your software. This is using the API interface, or maybe it's automatically protected with the CodeMeter protection suite. And then this contacts the CodeMeter license server on the client. From there, we have a connection over TCP/IP using the standard port 22350, and then via this, it's connected to the license server and gets all the information from there and can do the decryption or whatever should be done. There is an option to have a look on the licenses with the web admin, which is a browser-based application where you can just see the licenses, where you can see who is currently using the license, and this can be done either on the web admin, on the network license server itself, or also from outside, from another client. It's using another port. But of course, you need to prepare the network license server and to tell him that he should provide also this information to other systems. We made several changes in the last releases regarding the security, so that not by default all doors are open. We just now lock the doors, and you need to unlock during installation or later by some configuration to allow any users from other systems to access your system. Well, at next we want to have a look about the CM Cloud container. What is the difference between dongle, CM Act license, and cloud container on this network scenario, or in general? The cloud server is run in the cloud and is operated in our own data center. The local computer is running the CodeMeter license server, and then this connects via HTTPS to the cloud services. From the feeling, it looks like that the cloud container is directly plugged into your computer. So it looks like a dongle plugged in. And yeah, but all the cryptography is done in the cloud, and it's just connecting to there, so it works very good. The only thing that you need internet connection, of course. Well, after having a look on this, we will now switch to see how CodeMeter works and should work in virtual environments, and what needs to be taken care of, especially in this environment.
Yes, let's first highlight the Azure, the Microsoft Azure behavior. So as we said before, CodeMeter runtime is able to detect an Azure environment automatically. So it detects, okay, I'm running in such an environment. The Smartbind licenses automatically use a specific receipt for the binding operation. That is the Azure ID. That is coordinated with Microsoft for the unique identification of the virtual machine. So the status of the licenses are directly depending on the change of the Azure ID. That is very important to know, and we see on the next slide the table about that. But very important information is that CM Act licenses in virtual environments are by default not allowed to be used. So if you don't activate the option that it is possible to use it in virtual environments, it is forbidden to do that. But if you are allowing the use of your licenses in virtual environments, the behavior of the licenses is shown in the following table. And there are several scenarios that you have in virtual environments. Of course, a pause and resume of a virtual environment does not have an impact on the Azure ID. And that means, of course, there is also no impact on licenses. And we have different scenarios, a reboot of the virtual machine. We have a reboot of the host machine, the high availability restart, and a fault-tolerant failover do not have any impact. And by the way, Wolfgang, there are some scenarios that I was not aware that there exist. Can you please tell me a little bit more about what is a high availability restart, for example?
Yeah, there are several options in such virtual environments, in such data centers. They always want to provide you the service you have booked. And if they run into some trouble, if they, for example, some errors on the RAM, then you will be switched to another system. This is just a move, a smart move to another host, or if this is not possible, then they just start a last state of your virtual machine on another server and switch over within a few seconds or maybe also shorter time. And yeah, this is called a high availability restart, and yeah, fault tolerant failover in cases of some faults. There are, of course, then some special things you can do. You can also clone, of course, a system just quite easy by one click, and then you get a clone of this. But in these cases where you really duplicate the system or you create another instance, then this Azure ID changes, and therefore the licenses become invalid from this. And yeah, that's the important message, that this works fine. And so if you run the one instance you have licensed, then it works fine. If you do anything else, it will become invalid.
Great, thank you. So let's move forward to the AWS. What is the behavior there? Of course, the CodeMill runtime also detects AWS environments. The Smartbind licenses are specifically bound to the AWS instance ID. And the status of the license depends also here on the status of the instance ID. And again, you can avoid using CM Actualize in virtual environments by just doing nothing. Yeah. And if you want to activate it, then you have to set the relevant option for that. And there's a slightly different behavior here. Of course, the standard scenarios are the same: parse and resume, VM reboot, host reboot, high availability restart. Does not have any impact on the instance ID, and so no impact on the licenses as well. There are some scenarios that are not supported in AWS, but you see the import of move has no impact and leads to no impact of the licenses, but a copy or a clone of the system leads to a break of the licenses, but that's exactly what you want.
Yeah, so the technique in general is a little bit different, and therefore the table looks a little bit different on this.
Yeah, and moving from the public clouds and now to the virtual machines in general, we have the same.
It's just the same. We can just wind back 2 minutes and then start again. Well, not really. Of course, also for standard virtual machines, if you're running VMware on your system, something like this, then we detect this, and then we also use a specific recipe for a special creation for this virtual machine. We do a higher weighting of the external properties, the properties that really come from the hardware, and we are not using the ones that are still the same on all instances. Yeah, some of these properties change at a copy process, and of course we focus on this. We also have a mechanism to detect the reset of the VM of the virtual machine. So if it is switched back, then we detect this, and then also the license will break. So the table would look nearly the same as we have seen before for the special data center editions of virtualization. Well, always the same.
Always the same story, right?
Yeah. So if we are on the same machine, it looks like this. If you have, for example, VMware workstation running and you have a guest with some licenses inside, we have the 3 binding levels. You remember tight, medium, and loose, and we just focus now on medium and loose. And if you copy the VM, so you create a second instance, both of these, of course, break, and of course, tight will also break, and the license is no longer able to run. If you stay on the same host, you can move the VM, and then it remains still active, because this does not really change something. You have still the same instance. This does not really change something, so the license continues working. But the difference is, if you now go to another machine, then it behaves differently. In case of a move, only the loose variant of Smartbind will continue running, and medium will break. So this is one of the examples where you might want to differentiate between medium and loose. So if you say, okay, it should be able to move a license from one host to another, I agree. But of course, people that know very well about infrastructure, they might be able then to use this kind of move at the end to do it like a copy. So this is your decision. You have to change you have the choice what you want to do.
Yes, and to summarize that again in the table, you see here again all the scenarios and how does the generation ID in that case changes or not changes and what impact that has on the licenses. And what Wolfgang explained before, we have that differentiation between the binding loose and the binding medium of the CM-ACT licenses that lead to a different behavior if you move the license, the virtual machine to another machine. But every other scenario is the copy, clone, the snapshot revert, the hot snapshot revert, and the replication leads to a break of the licenses, and that's exactly what you want. If we have a look on the license, on the network license server in virtual machines, maybe you remember we have network licenses available. Of course, these licenses can also run within a virtual machine. So the license is stored on a network license server. That means that the licenses are available in that network. Here now the virtual machine, and as base of the licenses you can use the different container types, the CM-ACT license that is bound to that network server, to the hardware of that network server, a CM dongle that is connected of course to the server, and a CM cloud container where the credentials are stored on the server. So this server is now able to not to deliver, it's more to offer the licenses in such a network. The licenses are used via the general code meter network mechanism, and you have the maximum volume of available licenses on that server, and that server offers these licenses to all the clients. The network license server can run on the same host system where the virtual machine is set up as a guest. That is possible. It's not necessarily, but it is possible. And how does that look like now?
Yeah. In a graphic, it looks like this. You have the virtual machine, there your software runs in, and you have one instance of code meter license server, and then it's connecting via TCP/IP to the network code meter license server, and which holds then the license. And this is in general a preferred way to make licenses available for virtual machines, because then you don't have to bother about the problems with virtualization. You can just use the license on some real hardware. Well, now let's have a look about CM-ACT license in Docker containers. And of course, also here, CodeMeter Runtime will detect that it's running inside a Docker environment. And also in this case, CM-ACT licenses are not allowed by default in Docker containers. There are two exceptions. The first one is a protection-only license with a re-import flag. So this is not really a license. It's just the basis for doing the protection. And so it can be instantiated in 100 times. You don't have any positive effect on this, so it's no problem. And the other exception is if you decide, I want to activate a CM-ACT license in a Docker container, then you can set a flag. This is the container flag, and this is an additional flag. So this is not the same as always before with the locked VM flag. This is just for virtual environments. And if you want to have to run it in a container system like Docker, then you have the locked container option where you can activate this. But you should think about this if you really want this, but there are some scenarios. So we offered this, that this is in general possible. The famous way of working is to operate also via a network license server on the host system or somewhere else, maybe on the host system. So this looks like this, similar to the virtual environment in general. So the functionality is in general the same. You have one CodeMeter license server in the Docker container running, and then this connects to the CodeMeter license server on the host or possibly somewhere else. So how is this now done with in a special case of CM dongles in virtual environments? There you have the option to do it in the same way. So the dongle is on the host or on a network license server, and then you use the licenses just via this network license server. Now we have, another point about the CM dongles in virtual environments is that you might connect the dongle directly to a virtual machine. But this is from the support perspective sometimes a little bit problematic if you put it in directly. Sometimes next version of VMware changes a little bit, and then moving USB from the host directly to the virtual machine might become problematic. So this is, from my perspective, not the preferred way, but nevertheless you can do it, and if it works fine, okay. Important to know is that a dongle can in general only be used by one CodeMeter license server. And for example, if you have then a second instance of a virtual machine on another virtual machine, then you have you might want to connect also to the dongle on the other one. So this is not possible. So the dongle can only be assigned to one CodeMeter license server. But of course, from the second virtual machine, you could use it via a network interface. So just the first one operates as a network license server. This, of course, is possible. Well, now the last slide in this area is about CM Cloud containers in virtual environments. And this, of course, is very safe operation, because all the stuff that is necessary is, or that is important, the cryptography and the counting of the licenses is done on the cloud side. So you can have several virtual machines, Docker containers, whatever, run on your host, and then everything is counted in the cloud, and so you don't run into any problem. And of course, yeah, you need internet connection. So it depends on your customer scenarios if they are able to use CM Cloud containers.
Yes, and if we remember the threats and risks that we mentioned at the beginning of our webinar, let's see how we can solve that now with the different CodeMeter solution. So duplicating a license, that can be, of course, avoided by using CM dongles or CM Cloud containers, because these licenses are stored in a secure container. It cannot be attacked. It cannot be duplicated just by virtual machines. It's something outstanding here. So CMX licenses, that is the encrypted license file. It is strongly bound to a computer, as we mentioned that before. CMX licenses in a virtual machine, the same, an encrypted license file. It is a mixture of hardware and virtual properties that are used for that. Additionally, we have the scenario using a license after its expiration. We have in the dongles and in the containers a simulated clock that makes sure that the time cannot be cheated. In the CM dongles and CM Cloud containers, that clock is stored in a secure container. And when we have a look to CMX licenses and in CMake license in virtual machine, we have the protection against the reset of CM containers that make sure that you cannot use a license after its expiration.
For the pay-per-use units and the threat that they might be resetted, it is the same. The units are stored in the secure containers in case of CM dongles and CM cloud containers. And for CM Act licenses, we have protection against the reset of the container so that you really can count the units and you will not be cheated. The overuse of network licenses was also an additional threat, and for this we have the protection of the network server. So we are protecting our network CodeMeter network server and the CodeMeter license server in general with our own technology of the CodeMeter protection suite to protect it against tampering, to protect it against debugging and getting something out of there or injecting any different data. Yeah, for CM dongles, you have the chance. I never understood this sentence. Stefan, can you tell me what is this sentence on? What does it mean? CM dongles borrowed license in secure containers.
I think that means that you cannot overuse the network licenses because the licenses are secured in a good way in a CM dongle. But yeah, it's an interesting question here.
Yeah, and it yeah. So borrowing is also an option that we have, which could be an own webinar on showing all the options of borrowing. And borrowing is not only possible for dongles, also possible for CMake licenses. But then of course you have the same issues with different levels of security, and the dongle is the most secure variant and on the same level, maybe on the same level with the CM Cloud container. Well, for CM Act license, we also have this, that we are protected against the reset of the container, so that you can only use the network licenses as you have got there.
Yes, and we have the additional general threats and risks. If we have a look at the removing of copy protection that I mentioned before, so the hackers attack your application itself when you try to access the licenses, not the license itself, but the routine that checks for the license. And you can make sure that the application cannot be tampered if you use our CodeMeter protection suite that encrypts your software and encrypts all the functionalities within your software, and so that they cannot be cheated. Losing a license on the user side, our CM dongles has a very high mean time between failures, so it's a very good value to make sure that the licenses still are available on the CM dongles. Concerning CM Act licenses and CM Act licenses in virtual machines, we have to choose the right tolerance level of CodeMeter Smartbind to make that sure. The CM Cloud containers, of course, it's operated by our famous WIBU's operating services, so you can be sure that the licenses are available to an extremely high degree of availability. There are emergency licenses with CodeMeter License Central that you can offer to your customers to make sure that even in a bad situation, the customer can get the licenses he already had, but time limited, so the customer is able to activate these licenses again on an emergency system, for example. And of course, there is the possibility to reactivate licenses with the CodeMeter License Central on the customer side on another PC with the good hardware. If we check the property simulation, because now we are in the virtualization area, and virtualization means I can mirror everything I want to show. we use the properties especially that are especially designed for local virtual machines, like the Azure ID, the instance ID, the generation ID, to make that sure. The snapshots mean that we detect the reset of a virtual machine and the CMM container becomes invalid. That is very, very important for time-limited licenses, usage licenses. And the high availability means that the tolerance level of the CodeMeter Smartbind is set in the right way so that you can move such a machine, if that is necessary, to another hardware. And that's what we want to show you. So just a small summary on what we have shown you with the conclusions. A CMM can only be used once at a time, also in virtual environments, so there is no duplication of licenses possible. The CM Cloud containers are automatically counting concurrent users via the server in the cloud. The CodeMeter Smartbind handles everything automatically on real machines, on virtual machines, and in Docker containers. That's what we wanted to show you. And the CodeMeter Protection Suite provides IP protection for your application that is checking for the licenses. So not only the licenses are secured, you have with our CodeMeter technology the possibility to also protect the application itself. And these are the conclusions of our webinar today. I see we have a lot of questions available, so I want to take the most relevant that are interesting for all of our prospects and of our participants here. So one is, does the system support VMware?
Yeah, of course, the system we support VMware. It is one of the famous virtualization solutions that are on the market, and we have the different. We support the different versions. We detect them if this can be the VMware player, VMware workstation, or the ESXi servers and all this stuff. And this works fine, and we detect this virtualization. That's not a problem.
The next question is, how do you distribute the license and the license update when the software is running in a Docker container?
Well, if we think back on the solution for the Docker container, you have the license. We don't recommend to store the license within the Docker container, because this is something where you have a different handling. In Docker container, you normally you start this, you run this, and if it does no longer work, you kill it, and then you create a new instance. And with this, you don't have, you won't want to kill a container that contains a license that costs several hundred euros or dollars. Yeah. So therefore, the licenses should be stored in an environment which remains active and available all the time. And so this should be either a piece of hardware or a connection to the cloud container. If you're really running in a cloud environment, it's a perfect combination to store the license in the cloud, in a CM cloud container, and just connect it to your Docker containers. This is running fine and is reliable all the time. So we don't recommend to store the license inside a Docker container, because you don't really have a chance, and you will get a lot of claims of your customer that they say, oh, well, I just killed this container and now the license is gone. Where is it? And please send me a new one.
There's an additional question about the Smartbind algorithm that I explained before. So I said that there are characteristics of virtual machines included. Mm-hmm. Now the interesting question is, do we detect every virtual machine? Are we limited to some virtual machines? Here's the example of the Linode virtual machine. Do we detect such systems as well, or do we concentrate more on the VMware and the most popular things there?
Well, of course, we are checking a lot of the most popular variants, and there we do explicit tests. but we have in general we have a general detection of virtualization. So you have the possibility to detect in general that a CPU is not running in reality, that it is a virtualization. You can detect this, and this normally gets all the virtualizations. Of course, there might be some that do it in a different way and where this does not work, but I did not see one until now. So, if you have a special variant that we might not know, or where you, after some tests, you run in some trouble, then please tell us, open a support issue, contact us, and we will just check this. Of course, we will create additional recipes for other solutions that are not used until now in a wide range. And so if you and your customers are running some special systems, then please tell us, and then we will be able to enlarge also our test environments where we run these tests on.
Yes, and because we are running out of time, just one last question. The question is, we are talking about the license server. Is there the need to administrate it in a special way, or does it work automatically as a license server?
Well, if you have a standard installation of a CodeMeter runtime, this is running as, let's say, a local server. So just as a daemon that serves only the local requests, so of applications running on the same system. But you can just change the way of operating of the CodeMeter license server, and then it modifies itself to a network server. And for this, you need to run on Windows. You need to run the install again, because we need to open some the ports for the firewall, and then we change the binding of the IP. But so you need to configure it, yes, and you need also to configure if you, for example, want to access the web admin, the browser interface from outside. But it's nothing that needs to be licensed in a separate way, or that needs a lot of resources. So I always say you can run in a small company with 5 people. So a CodeMeter license network server could run just on the secretary PC. Yeah, that's not, you don't need a big server thing for this. The requirements are really low for this. You just need to configure it. By default, due to security issues in general, we just start with a local variant, but during the installation, you can just say, okay, please open for network use and activate the network functionality, then it works. And of course, on another level, you on your side decide how a license should work. As seen, we have, of course, the property in the license, if this license is only a local license, or if this is allowed to be a network license. So you can, per default, a license, if you program one license, it's a floating network license with a quantity of 1, but you can set it to a different number, and you can add the attribute, well, this should be only a local license. And so also your users cannot cheat you by setting up the network server, the license server, as a network server. Nevertheless, it's only a local license.
Great, thank you very much for that detailed explanation. All other questions will be answered after that webinar. I want to thank you very much for your time that you spent with us. I hope you will participate our next webinars next year. So from my side, season greetings and stay safe.
Yes, bye-bye also from my side.